Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere in dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
Welcome everyone to the Stoa. I'm Peter Lindbergh, the steward of the Stoa. Stoa is a place for us to cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of this very moment. And today we have a somatic trauma healer, podcast host, and entrepreneur, Cris Beasley. And this is a launch party, I think. I think it's fair to call this a launch party. Becoming Dragon. It's a 64 card deck to bring clarity amidst chaos and uncertainty. So it's gonna be quite cool today. Cris and I are gonna jam about what exactly this card deck is, what it's made for, what it's in service towards. And we have our boy David Swedlow here. He's gonna maybe share his screen and show some of the cards. Anytime during the conversation between Cris and I, just throw your questions in the chat. Unmute yourself. Ask your question to Cris. If you don't want to be on YouTube, because this will be on YouTube, indicate that and I'll read your question. And Chris's audio is a little bit, could be a little skippy and the audio quality is not the best, but we'll make do. Opportunity to practice one's stoicism as always. So I think I covered everything. Cris, how's it going? Welcome to Stoa. Oh, you're on mute. Let's put you, yeah.
Hello. Hi, welcome everybody. I just want to do a little gauge of how much dragons in particular were a factor in you coming to this thing. Like you were like, dragons, I want a dragon. I want to go to, what was the dragon thing? Okay. We got stories about dragons.
That's the only reason why
awesome.
I invited you on, just because the word dragon in there, and I got excited.
Just saying. It's a big deal.
That's a total lie, because there's more reasons I invited you on, because this card deck looks really dope. And before maybe, is there anything you want to share generally before I dive into some questions?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think first and foremost, why I was excited to join you all at the Stoa is just the amazing synthesis of the different thinkers. I mean, when I look at the Stoa's page, I'm like, oh my God, I get to be in the Stoa with all these fascinating people, Nora Bateson, Noam Chomsky. I mean, these are just amazing thinkers, and I feel really honored to be here to add my piece of it. And somehow or another, my work fits in with complexity theory and linguistics in a way that I deeply get in my bones. And yet, you probably wouldn't expect that from a card deck. So I'm excited to show you a few of the layers. As I was talking to David yesterday, you know, we were just having this hilarious moment where like, we could easily spend 90 minutes diving into a single one of these cards and not cover everything that's in here. So I'm interested in this being a dynamic process and responding to who's in the room here. I think that's what's fun about being on a live Zoom. I kind of almost want to go back and watch Zooms. I'm going to be in the Zoom. I'm going to be asking questions. So please take advantage of that and let's have a big back and forth.
Cool. So yeah, and feel free to start throwing your questions in the chat anytime, and then I'll probably call on you in 10, 15 minutes. So I think it'd be helpful for me and the other people in the room who might not be familiar with your background in somatic healing, just to kind of maybe explain what you do and then how that informed this project, and we can get the weeds of the card deck.
Great. Well, I'm going to actually step back one or two job titles before somatic healer because I need to explain how I got to be one. And that is that I worked in tech for 20 years. I was a product designer, product manager for Mozilla, makers of Firefox. And then I went on to start my own company, be the CEO, founder. And that was, as I'm sure you've been told or know from personal experience, it's a hellish experience. It's incredible. I didn't really know what burnout was until it was already too late. And I needed to take some time and rest and become human again. And after about 6 months of living in California in a bikini and just hanging out and eating good food and being with lovely people, I still wasn't a human again. So I needed to go actively put myself back together. And in that process, I fell down the sort of rabbit hole of embodied technology because I'm a technology designer at heart. And it is a short little hop, skip, and a jump from getting interested in embodiment to starting to realize how profoundly we are embodied. And trauma is such a key piece of understanding how that embodiment is informing our narrative. I started to say, it's such an important blockage. It's like, no, it's not in the way. It is the way. And that's maybe the key lesson that started me down this path.
And you got this quote from Rumi on the website, the cure for the pain is in the pain.
Yes, this is the core piece of this. The idea that instead of blocking away a difficult emotion like rage or jealousy or sadness, that once you get the hang of it and you learn how to face into the dark emotions, there is inevitably a little pot of gold at the very center of that. I think that, going back to the dragon archetype, the dragon guards the gold, right? So if you are really in a jam and you're really, really feeling a lot in your body, you have hit upon a precious treasure for sure. I don't know what it is, but we know for sure there's something extraordinary when you get to the other side of understanding, where did it come from? What's it trying to tell me right now? Why is it showing up in my life in this moment? And those are the journeys that I go on as a somatic therapist with my clients in my one-on-one sessions. And, being a product designer, I didn't just want to do one-on-one sessions. I always want to take this voice of what I've learned onto the global stage and have it be able to reach as many people as possible.
So with that background in mind, could you provide a summary on what Becoming Dragon is?
Sure. It's so hard to know where to start. I'll start with the polarities. So here is the dragon card, and we'll give David an opportunity to pull that one up. The dragon card is really, you can't really see, but in its upright position, you can see the word dragon. I think it's backwards for me. I don't know if it's right for you. And then upside down, if you were to shuffle the deck the other way around, you could just as likely pull the card with the victim word facing you. So this is perhaps one of the meta cards of the deck. And the idea of it is that whichever way you pull the card, we're going to investigate the entire polarity. I was just telling Peter before we started that at one point in my life, I was really interested in the answers to questions. And at this point in my life, I'm interested in living the question. And I see the question as being described by a polarity that can never be, quote unquote, solved or understood by the mind. But if you can understand what the forces are that are pulling you in opposite directions, then your life can describe the intricate, I'm imagining like somebody being pulled back and forth as they're walking, and they have this intricate path that would never have been described by their feet if they hadn't been, I'm pulled in this way for a while, and I get pulled in this way for a while. And nobody's life is ever a straight line. It would be incredibly boring if it was. So these 64 cards are 64 provocations, or they're a bit like Zen koans of emotion, I would say, is maybe a way to understand these 64 keys.
And before we get into like how to play it, why 64? And I saw on the website it's the Enneagram that it was informed by. Maybe you can explain a little bit more of the making of the cards.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, I thought I was writing a book about walking the Camino in Spain. I thought I was writing a travel memoir. And eventually I got into just an utter cold panic where I couldn't tell what I've been writing for so long, and I didn't have an outline because I'd never written a book before, and I have a very emergent process, and I knew I didn't want to know what book I was writing before I start. So there was no structure, there was no outline, and at some point that totally fell apart. And I reached out to a friend of mine, Corey Doctorow, who some of you may appreciate his work. And I was like, Corey, I feel like I'm sitting in a bathtub full of spaghetti with one long idea noodle, and I have no idea what to do next. I don't know how to get myself out of this bathtub. And thank God Corey does not bullshit people. He didn't tell me what to do at all. He said, all writers have an idiosyncratic process, and you're going to have to discover yours, which felt like you're up shit creek without a paddle. You better figure out how to make a paddle. But if he had lied to me and given me a paddle that wasn't my paddle, I probably would have tried to paddle with it, and it wouldn't have worked. Because there's no way in a million years Corey Doctorow would have told me I was making tarot decks. Corey doesn't even like tarot. So I just kept going. And I followed my rabbit hole. And one day I had gotten obsessed with tarot. I thought I was wasting my life with tarot. And one day I woke up and realized that I could impose a structure onto what I had written. I was like, oh my God, I'm writing a guidebook to a card deck, and each one of these can be divided into a chapter. Thank God. And I just zipped down. I took out some index cards, which I think I have somewhere with me, and drew the first 20 or so cards. And then I was off to the races, and it went through a couple more iterations after then. At some point I had the insight, because one of the problems with tarot, or one of the challenges of tarot, is that I really felt strongly that I wanted to read reversals, even though I was a beginner reader. And that's kind of an advanced topic, and you don't get much support reading reversals. It's like, what does the opposite of the tower mean? Is that good? Is that the good tower? Is like a double negative? Does it reverse it? And so I just decided to name both sides. It was very much influenced by human design, and the Gene Keys this insight that within everything that there's a gift. So you've got the shadow, the gift, and the city. So I didn't do 3 because I couldn't figure out how to make 3 fit on a card. But we'll just say that the city is an unnamed in these. I'm not quite reaching that high anyway. And last bit was, why does it have 64 cards? I'm just going to tell you the truth. I don't know. I just sometimes have a bone deep knowing that something is, and I took a week in the cabin to work on the card deck, and at some point I just got the message that it was a 64 card deck. And so then maybe 2-3 months later, when I got the next insight that this wanted to be about the Enneagram, I was like, let me check. Let me see if it's a 64 card deck. And so I went and I was like, 9, how many times does 9 go into 64? Okay, 7 emotional pairs per Enneagram type is 63, and then you can have a joker. Yes! Literally, that's what it sounded like in my internal monologue. And I do know that there is a second deck called Chasm that is a reinvention of, it's like a synthesis of the tarot and the 6 lines of the I Ching that takes off the major arcana that makes the tarot into a 64 card deck. And for some reason, that's important. I don't get it. Like, with these symbols, I often don't actually know why until later. So we just have to put the dots down and the lines will connect them whenever we find out about it. It's honestly the weirdest creation process I have ever been witness to. I don't really feel like I created this much as I feel like it created me. This deck transformed me. And I knew that I had finished doing the symbol when I looked at the symbol, and I was like, oh, that is looking back at me. I don't know. We're going to have a relationship, aren't we? Like it became this character of its own in a way that's difficult to express. I'd certainly never experienced it before. So if I sound like a crazy person, I get it.
It's good to be a crazy person here at the Stoa. The lines are so blurred. We don't. And
We don't know what's happening.
I'm very excited to like go through some of them. Maybe we can kind of look through them. But like, how do you play? That's probably central to discuss.
Yeah. Got it. So how we play. The way that I start readings with people is to ask them the provocative question, what's the pot of oatmeal in your life that is about to boil over? And generally that elicits a pretty quick response. People are like, ooh, yeah, I know. And that's what we want to go into. We could talk about a lot of shit, but I find that people really want to talk about what's personal and detailed and like specific and concrete. I'm very practical, despite the fact that I have made a card deck. Actually, I prefer like a practical form of magic, if there is such a thing. And from there, I have them tell me what the question is, and I kind of just switch off my regular conscious awareness, and I go into a different place that I developed in the course of doing tarot. And I just access my intuition for what sort of is called a spread. I don't know how familiar people are with drawing cards, but a spread is just a number of cards between 1 and the number you have in your deck. Usually like 1, 2, 3. Some people like to do spreads with up to 10 cards, but for me, that's personally just muddying the waters. It's too much to explore. And I usually have an hour with people. So in an hour, we usually turn 3, 4, maybe 5 cards. But you need to give each card a job. You need to give it a context. So let's pretend you had asked me a question about work. And I was like, okay, so let's do the spread where we turn 1 card for your feminine energy. How are you receiving? How's accountability going? We do 1 card for your masculine, how are you taking action? We do the bottom card for what kind of hopes or fears might be coming up. And then the top card, which is like, I call the spread the summit. What's the summit? What are we, the nature of the challenge? What is asking to be resolved? And like, what kind of resolution are we moving to as we transform this energy and move into the resolution? So that would be how we like, quote unquote, play. There's no points. There's also no rules. I have a few rules, but they're very small.
David is privately messaging me. He says, do you actually want to explore a question? And I'm like, for me or for you? He's like, for you. So I don't know if you want to play with me, Cris, or you want to like look at some cards. I'm open for.
Oh yeah. I mean, if anybody wants to throw a question, we could do a live reading. I think that'd be super fun. If anyone wants to volunteer to bring something to the group that they're willing to speak about, and
I think it'd be
for a collective.
How about a live reading for the Stoa? It might be good to show a few more cards just to get a sense of what they are, because we saw that meta card, the dragon, and then we can do something kind of cool like that.
Yeah, I don't know how good my video is, but we can just flip through a couple. This one, shed skin and fuck it up. I'm a shadow worker. I don't do my clients any good by like pulling punches. And when we're really in the depths of it, people cuss. So I'm naming the cards really to speak to a certain energy, a word that's going to have you connect to a sensation in your body. So they're worded in a very raw way.
What's the number on that one, Cris?
What's that?
Read the number to me whenever you pull one up.
Oh, okay. So this is 3. This is truth and self-deception. This card has been coming up quite a bit lately. It's also one of the cards that turns out to have a physics symbol. This is at least the second card that relates to a physics symbol. I'll be like watching the scene Harmine, and he'll put a graphic up on the screen, and I have to screen capture it because I'm like, oh my God, it's the cone of light that expresses the what is it, like the height of some crazy hyperspace plane of the present moment, and these cones express the potential of the past and and the future with that horizontal line representing the plane of the present moment. I was like, wow, how does that connect to truth and self-deception? That seems resonant. So it's been this whole deck has just been weird. I don't know what to tell you. So this is number 2, the should monster and higher self. So Enneagram 2, is anybody familiar with the Enneagram? Please throw up your hands. I should probably give a few people. Okay, cool. So the Enneagram 2 is tends to have issues with over caring and being the helper. It's like, problem? What problem? I'm here to help you with your problem. So the 2s, I have a 2 wing and a 3-2, really can struggle with the inner voice of the should. Well, I should be nice to my mom. I should call my sister. I should blah, blah, blah. Fill in the freaking blank, right? And a real moment of healing for the 2's ego structure is when they can tap into something that's deeper than the voice of conditioning, that can sift through, because there are some good shoulds. Say that 3 times fast. But it takes you thinking into who you really are and what you really want, and accessing that voice of guidance that your higher self can provide to sift it out. Because there's maybe, 2% of the shoulds are things that you truly either want to do or truly have to do. Okay. Let's see, what else do we want to put up? Oh, I think you'll like this one. This is the 5, grasping and genius. This really, I don't know if anybody knows Michael Mead's work in the book, The Genius Myth, but if you look at the origins of the word genius, it wasn't describing a person. It was describing a spirit that inhabited the person, or like a guest that would come visit you. So you didn't have the pressure of having to be a genius. You're just like, yeah, sometimes I write great poetry. My genius comes visit me. There's also the concept of the genius loci, the genius of the place. And then the opposite, the polarity of genius, is grasping. So perhaps many of you, like me, are overachievers and got a lot of self-worth, got a lot of praise from your parents or your teachers, or even maybe your peers for being smart, being a genius in one way, shape, or form. But it can turn inside out on you. That gift can be strangely a burden as well. I have a friend who's kind of a genius music savant, and it has this weird bitterness to it, because it's like when people compliment him for being a good musician, you can just see it run off of him like water on a duck's back, because it isn't integrated, and he's grasped at that for self-worth. So I don't know how many of these to do, but this maybe gives you a flavor. That was 5 of them. Maybe it was 5 of them. I can't count.
Cool. So what would you like to do, Cris? Would you like to ask field some general questions from the chats, or do you want to actually do a live reading with me or with?
Do we have a good live reading question? Let me just have a look. Impactful story of some cards in action. Mental model of how divination works. That's a juicy question. I'm gonna grab that one. God, that's been such a hot topic, like even this week, honestly. Like, I sent David a 5-minute download of something that I had written in the morning. I do a lot of my deep thinking in the morning, and I thought this was really good, and I sent it to David, and he was like, I don't really know what you're talking about. So I'm going to try to meet us all here where we are on this question. I imagine this is one that some people are super freaked out by divination, and if you are, totally fine, totally cool. It freaks me out too, to be honest. There's some deeply unsettling thing about it. Like, you can predict the future. Is that what cards are for? I think this is one of the big misconceptions about cards, and I think people, going back to this grasping word, I think tarot in particular, and Norman for sure, is right for wanting to externalize your power to a card to get them to tell you what the future is going to be like. So you just turn over a good card and I'll just do the thing that the cards say is going to work out. I don't find it works that way. So for me, the point of divination isn't to tell the future, but I say that with a big asterisk. We're going to come back to that. It is to, I think the way that like entry level people that have never used cards before, and divination is just going to freak them right out, and it is very subtle. I would not encourage people to start with divination. It's tricky for me. I don't know how to teach you how to do it super well, so I can't like set my foot energetically on that. But what I can do is say that if you want, like, I was doing some card readings just today about the future, and it wasn't really about the future though. It was about what do I need to do today? What do I need to plan for in the future that I need to take action on today? And that is something the cards are really great at. So the difference is so subtle, right? We don't plan because we know how the future is going to go. We plan so that we know what to do right now. And if you think the cards are going to predict the future, probably not going to. They're eventually going to say that something is good for you that isn't going to work out, and you're going to like throw your card deck away and lose your whole faith in cards. But there's nothing to have faith in any more than a pencil. You don't need to believe in a pencil to use a pencil to draw. It's just a tool, right? But these are powerful tools, and they do need to be used skillfully, and they can cause harm. I mean, pencil can cause harm as well if you write powerful words with it. So that was a lot. Let me just slow down and let some of that soak in. My example this morning, I needed to decide whether I was going to end my campaign on the 29th of December as originally planned, or if I was going to bump it out to 7th of January to take advantage of some press that may or may not materialize. So I could have drawn the card in a way to say, effectively, like, is this press going to come through? Please show me something unknowable about the future so I can know it's going to work out. It's like this grasping part of us that just wants to know everything's going to work out. So there's just a vulnerability with cards, right? So I did the card read, but I did it in a different way, which was I drew one card for what my hope was and another card for what my fear was, just so I could introspect what is true for me right now. And I got the Shed Monster for the 29th of December. And that's exactly right. I feel like that's the thing I should do. And it was a really like instant, yes, I am doing that. The only reason that I would do that is because I feel like I should do that. And it feels more comfortable. And then the other card that I got for the 7th of January was the Shed Skin Fuck It Up, which I'm like, yeah, give me that energy. I want to like crack this open. Let's do it. So it was a really quick way for me to do it. They feel like throwing a lance right into the center of your emotional and energetic body in a way that gives you way quicker clarity. And sometimes I have to chew on things a little bit longer than that. But in this instance, I probably spent 10 minutes and was able to crack through and make a really difficult decision. In like with other tools, I don't know what I would have done except for just like freak out about it. Or maybe do some journaling. That's really helpful. But cards are a quicker way to process those decisions for me.
Right. Let's circle back to Elliot's question. Elliot, can you unmute yourself and ask your question to Cris? Elliot, you still here, or did you bounce? Oh, there he is. Oh, yeah. I have to let you mute. Hold on 1 minute. I gotta let everyone unmute themselves. There we go.
There we go. Okay. Hi, Cris. Was hoping you could share maybe a story of one of these cards in action, maybe an example of some time that it was impactful either for you or for, I guess, a client.
That's such a really broad wide open question, which I love because it gives me a lot of room to maneuver. I'm also curious if you might be able to give me like any more detail about you or your interests. Like, do you have a background with cards, or are you brand new?
I'm brand new to cards in this context. But I guess, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how much, sorry for the lighting, how much these kind of are parallel with like a straight tarot card type card versus, you know, sometimes just an idea, an icon, a symbol can be useful with personal development type or self-reflection type stuff. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around where kind of in that spectrum these lie. Is there an actual game, or is it more kind of looking for insight from whatever card you happen to flip over, asking a specific question, etc.?
Great, thank you. That really helps. It's such a hard question to answer. Is it tarot? My instinct is to say no. Anybody who's like a real tarot, like I wouldn't consider something a tarot deck unless it had 78 cards, 22 cards of major arcana, 4 suits. By the way, tarot is what your poker deck descended from. So 4 suits, you know, like the court cards, and some people reskin it a little bit, but that framework of the journey from the Fool to the Wheel and that structure to me is tarot. So in that sense, it's not tarot. But the skill set that I learned in how to pick a card, how to do a reading, you know, how to think about archetypes, how do those archetypes fit into your world, how to look at a symbol and notice what you're noticing, like all of that skill set of reading cards is completely applicable to this deck as well. It's just a completely different framework and doesn't pull in from those archetypes. A story of when it has been particularly impactful. Trying to think of a particular story, but I would say maybe I've done 1 or 2 readings in the last year that I felt like didn't really land with people, but that was because they were blocked by like, I need to believe in this for it to be meaningful. And I still even think those were 2 good conversations. It was just like, they had a lot more resistance to working with the symbols and the archetypes. So it wasn't as easy for me to go as deep with them, but yeah, I mean, I frequently will get people saying, will you send me a picture of the spread when we're done? It's going to be a long weekend and I need to do some journaling about this. Or like a friend of mine, I've been doing beta testing a lot this last month, and we turned over a particular card and I saw his face actually flush pink, you know, like full body, because that, and it wasn't even the words that were on the card, it was the image that was on the card. So sometimes I feel like the images cut deeper than the words do, because the words have to go through our logic brain. And when you see an image on the card and it has a synchronicity for you, it has a special significance, your rational mind can just argue with it as much as it wants, but you just watched it happen. It's just true. So I think those are the places where it has the most impact. You know, there's crazy things like drawing the same card 3 times in a day, which happens to me with some regularity. You know, I'll do readings and I'm like, this fucking card. And I think as you own a deck, if you're just being read for, you're not going to get that kind of pattern coming up. You're not going to see where the cards that are coming up frequently are, and then connect that to sort of the energetic of the whole. But when you're a reader and you're pulling cards on a regular basis for people and you start to see the patterns, that's when it gets nutty, like super nutty. in my own personal, I'm a little bit hesitant to tell a powerful story about somebody else's life just because I can't go into any of the specifics, and these stories are not very interesting if you don't know the details. So I'm going to tell one from my own life. It was about tarot. It wasn't about my deck. But in 2018, David and I went down to Tepoztlán, Mexico, and it was just crazy. Like, lots of crazy shit happened. Very powerful time in my life, and I had started keeping a journal where I would record every time I would pull a card. I would write down what the question was and just a little paragraph or so about my observations. And my hope was that eventually I would start to pull the same cards and I would develop a personal relationship with that archetype in a way that otherwise I wouldn't notice. So 2018 in July, I was in Mexico, pulled the Queen of Wands. 2 years later, July 2020, in Mexico. I didn't live in Mexico in the between time. I lived in Oregon in the between time, but I had just come back to Mexico, and I pulled the Queen of Wands, and so I opened up my tarot page, and I'm like, oh, freaking shit! It's like it was within a week of being exactly 2 years. Same card, same question, exact same question. Which I felt a little ashamed of myself. I'm like, wow, I need to go back to school on this apparently. But it was so good to see those things happen. And that's what I mean by practical magic. You can argue with what happened, and we don't have to make up a story about why. I don't really care why it happened. I just know that it happened, and that coincidence is extraordinary. And it feels like I would never have that lens if I didn't use cards. Mm. So I would say that's the thing. And that brings up, like, why did I make a card deck in the first place? Well, I hate small talk. I'm terrible at it, and I mostly just go home. And I wanted to have friends, but this was like my lance. I needed a lance to be able to invite people into my world. And when I sit down at any kind of social networking thing and I put my cards down, this even just happened in Mexico, all I did was I was sitting there drinking my hot chocolate and I picked up my cards and I shuffled, and the security guard and the lady who owned the cafe and somebody else, they were all like, "Tu sabes tarot? Do you know tarot?" And even though I didn't speak much Spanish and they did not speak any English at all, we managed to do a card reading for all four of them. And it just, people self-select in to have deep conversations with me. And it's, even if you don't want to use these so much personally, that is a whole other world of possibilities that cards open up, especially because these are super colorful and juicy and provocative. And, you know, one of my friends uses them with her girlfriends. They'll sit down and have some beers and just keep turning cards, and that's the conversational fodder. But when your cards say things like dragon and wander and codependent, you're going to have a super different conversation, right?
Seems like really good fodder to just kind of bring things out of people that you might not generate yourself, right?
Exactly.
Right on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Chris,
I hope that was helpful.
Chris, you had a question.
Yeah, so hey Chris, I wanted to know which card ended up being the most emotionally impactful for you to design.
Ooh, I love this question. See, I told Peter that somebody was going to ask me something I've never been asked before. I'm so excited. I have to look through the deck. Ooh. Okay, it's this one. I don't know if the store. Okay, let me just see if there's anything else that comes close to this one. I feel like I'm just going to tell you all a series of crazy stories about synchronicities that happened in my life. Maybe you'll go down a synchronous path as well, and it will be so delightful you'll stop worrying about trying to control your life. Okay, David, this is 3, manipulative and leader. Let me get on this side. Okay, so the content of the card is powerful in and of itself, because it is really the card that is the most essentially about power dynamics, except for maybe narcissist and past. I don't think also very much about power dynamics. But this one started out as just a very straight, kind of like the sword that you would see on I don't know, like a poker deck, the king's sword. It's just a plain, like, English-looking sword. And then, this is a long story. I'm going to try to condense it as quickly as possible. I was doing a Kabbalistic meditation, and I asked, who am I? And what I heard was, shut up, mate. And I was like, come again? Sometimes I hear things in other languages, and I'm like, that's not fair. That's Sanskrit. I have to look up that word to even see what it means when I come out of my meditation. So I heard it again, Shadab Mates. And I was like, the housekeeper from Dune? And so I kept asking, and I kept getting it. And I asked, and I got another thing about being a sound healer, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I wasn't even really doing sound healing at that point. And then I asked again, and I got shot of mates again. And so at this point, I just wrote it down in my notebook. I'm like, I'm going to have to make sense of this later. I don't understand what's going on. So I look up shot of mates, and turns out she's the keeper of the Cris knife. And I just changed my name to Cris in 2018. My given name is Crystal. And so, and it was, I only agreed or figured out that I wanted to change my name to Cris when I figured out that the spelling was C-R-I-S. So the spelling was really important, because C-R-Y-S is stupid and C-H-R-I-S is more male, and C-R-I-S. So I look up Cris, and this is how Cris knife is also spelled. There's some variants with K-R-I-S. But, so I decided, let's do this. I'm going to go to Bali. I'm going to meet the Cris makers, because they're the shaman's sword. I should back up, because maybe 2 months previous to that, in meditation, I was getting stuff about a shaman's sword. And I was like, shamans have swords? I didn't know shamans had swords, but it turns out in some cultures, the sword is a very emblematic piece of the ritual, is using the sword. So now I find out that there's a thing called the Cris knife, and then it doesn't only just exist in the Dune fictional universe, it's really in Bali and Java and in Indonesia, and they speak blessings into it, and it's a whole thing, and there's only a handful of Cris knife makers. So go to book my ticket on Bali, to Bali, and as I'm searching the Google flights, there's many options, and I just get a strong feeling that I want to book my flight on Singapore Air. And I booked my flight on Singapore Air on their website, and their frequent flyer program is the Cris Flyer. So I think there were even more instances of Cris coming up, and it had a feeling of investing in me, this trust in the rightness of what I was doing and in the timing of everything that I was working on, and this being this holy sword, this sacred sword, gave the meaning that I was talking about here, this polarity between manipulation and leadership, as sort of sacredness. And whenever anybody pulls this card, I'm like, where's your sword? Are you afraid of it? Is it sharp? Is it under the bed? Did you hang it on the wall as an ornament? Did somebody else give it to you and you wish you didn't have it? Like, these questions really start to pull at the stuff that's stuck in our body, this gunk that's keeping us from taking out our goddamn big sword and using it for what it was given to us for. So, yeah, and I've been feeling more and more those moments where my sword is being asked for, and I'm stepping forward into cutting through the bullshit. That's what my sword's for. I don't know what your sword's for, but let's find out, right? And let's do the work of clearing that gunk so you can hold your sword And like, it's going to be a lot more fun, right? Did that answer your question?
I want to just pop in there, Chris, and say, because the card specifically is leader and manipulative, that's a really interesting aspect of the shaman thing, right? As we're in this period where shit's all crazy, nobody knows which end is up. One of the questions is, when do I know to follow somebody? When do I know to follow a leader, or if they're being sneaky about something? And that card helps with me, for me asking that of myself. So it's a fascinating, especially with that shaman sword, really key to distinguish between the leadership energy and the manipulation energy.
I just want to add that I feel like before I started this card deck, that I had most of these polarities blended within myself, which is a funny way to say this, but like I couldn't tell the difference between leadership and manipulation in certain situations. I was having trouble discerning between it. And the work of healing these polarities feels like splitting apart the energy so that in your body, you can actually feel the difference when you're in the presence of manipulation. You have a sensation that's present in your body. You know, sometimes it feels like, I don't know, maybe I can imagine, sometimes when I listen to people who I find to be very manipulative, I get a bit of a stomach ache. And it's that mapping our body of our own particular idiosyncratic sensations that correspond to each of these emotions. Because I often think that we have sort of a mental simulation of what emotions are that is not connected to the grounded feeling in your body. What does manipulation do to you physically when you're in the presence of it? What does being trapped feel like in your body? Is it in your solar plexus? Is it in your throat? You know? So mapping your particular body's cartography of emotions and be able to immediately name them is a freaking superpower.
All right. Did you have any follow-up, Chris? No. So what shall we do now? Do you want to do a reading?
Let's do a reading. That'd be fun.
And so how should we source the questions, you think? Just people throw it in the chat and you pick one?
Yeah. I wanted to see if I think there were a couple. Yeah, put some questions in the chat. Or my ideal situation would be if somebody is willing to volunteer to do a reading, because then you'll really get to see how it is. And you don't have to pick anything that's particularly vulnerable, because we want to be able to talk about it. So if anybody's up for the hot seat, I'd be delighted.
So if anyone's interested, Theo, you said you go. Would you like to unmute yourself, Theo? There he is.
All right. Hey, yeah, I'll do it. So how do we get started?
I'm trying to find your video to pin it here. So if you will just fill me in, what's up? What would you like? What's your hot boiling pot of oatmeal today?
Boiling pot of oatmeal today. I would have to say it has to deal with my business.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us a little bit of juiciness on it?
Basically, will I get outside funding or no? That is the question.
That's so good. I'm such an entrepreneur. I'm delighted for your topic matter in particular. I'm just going to move my keyboard so I have space to lay some cards down. I have to a bit get quiet and leave my verbal brain, which has been very active for the last few minutes. So give me a second to sort of switch my place that my consciousness is originating from. Okay, so tell me a little bit more about I imagine there's some pressure. You wouldn't maybe be in this place if this was it doesn't feel like this is your first choice. This is just my read on it is like, I don't really want to do this, but I feel like I have to.
Oh, that'd be correct. Yeah.
Okay.
If I could finance it by myself, I would.
Cool. So my sense is to maybe step the question back one layer, just so that, you know, this is great. I don't like doing yes/no readings. I think yes/no readings are, you're not really accessing the full power of the deck. It's not a yes/no tool. It's more like if I do this thing, what are my fears? If I do this thing, what are my hopes? But in your case in particular, I have the intuitive hit that the thing that we really need to talk about is outside the scope of the question. So do you have a sense of how we could ask that in a little bit bigger frame?
So going off of like, what are my fears? What are my hopes? My fears are if I don't get outside funding, then I can't progress the idea. My hope is if I get outside funding, then I can really empower people and start to progress the idea.
Yeah, got it. I feel the resonance of this question in such a major way on the fractal. So I don't know if we're going to do this on this particular reading. I think not, but I just want to mention this as a spread because often I like doing a spread called the fractal, which is how is this personally impacting me? How is this impacting my community, sort of my local community? And then how is this showing up in the world? I don't want to use that one for this particular question, but I'm mentioning it because I think somebody else probably might want to use that one. I'm hunting for something. I feel really resistant to doing a reading about should I get outside funding or not. I also feel resistant to just examining more fully your hopes and fears about getting funding because I feel like there's another frame that actually is.
Hey, well, we can switch to my love life.
No. I want to stay with this. One, but I'm sorry. I'm needing to kind of like do an intuitive pull here, and I literally just have to get quiet in a way that is hard when there's 30 people watching me. Okay. Give me just a second to breathe. Everybody breathe with me. Breathe with Theo. We've all been in a place where we were feeling like we had to, we're sort of pushed up against a wall. We were trapped in between what felt like our purpose, our dream, our thing we're trying to do, and the realities in the material world. It's such a universal experience, right? What else is there? I think let's do a masculine-feminine spread. We might draw some additional cards, but I want to start there. And it's just what you're naming is so common. We have all been exactly in your shoes, I feel like. I've certainly been in that boat. And I feel it's like the question that we're sort of bridging in this moment as a collective where, from my standpoint, it looks like we are shifting how resources get allocated in a really fundamental level, and those of us who can see where we're going want to already live in that world, and we don't already live in that world. So how would be in this moment of transition? That's maybe how I would up-level the question. Does that feel right to you? Am I on the right track? Okay, cool. Okay, now I'm satisfied. We can draw cards. You can see how much care and time I'm putting into just asking the question. And I would encourage you all to do this as well, because even if you don't have a card deck, if you bring this much care to the problem frame and then you just sit down and journal, you're going to get a way better result. And cards just take it to the next level for me. So, okay, now I'm going to pull a card. and this looks really funny for me and I'm a little self-conscious about it, but I want to describe it because I think it's important. So this is one of the things, like once you've been pulling cards for many years, you'll start to develop your own body's relationship with the cards. And it probably won't look like what I'm doing, but I just want to show you what my body does because it's weird and your body's probably going to do something weird too. So just be open to the process. And in the meantime, don't worry about it. Like when I just first started, I would just cut the deck and I'd just turn the cards off the top of the deck and that was it. But at some point, I just kept following how my hands wanted to shuffle the cards, how they wanted to turn the cards. And again, I'm like switching off that normal busy mind conscious awareness and tapping into how my body wants to move itself, if that makes any sense to anybody. Okay, so I'm going to turn the cards. I'm going to get quiet, and I'm going to touch every single card like this. And when I get to his card, my head just does this really fast jerk. And that's how I know that's the card. And I'm always terrified it's not going to work when I'm on camera, but it always does, so we'll go through it. Y'all just getting drug along with my awkward ass, and that's just how it is. Okay. Drawing a card for the feminine. Okay. Drawing a card for the masculine. I find it helps to clearly hold in my mind the position of the card or the intention of the card. If I don't, sometimes I have to restart because it's not really working and I have to go back to the front of the deck and I have to really like present moment, come back to what am I doing right now? What's the name of the card that I'm drawing right now? Masculine. Okay, here we have two. Okay, so the feminine position is going to talk about two things. It's going to talk about how you are receiving and how you are sort of completing the feedback loop. I actually think I'm going to turn the masculine card first because this is kind of my new understanding that's even been coming through in the last few weeks is that the masculine takes action and then the feminine says, how did that go? Let's complete the feedback loop. Let's notice how did the action that we took impact people. We know we started with a great intention, but did it work? Did it grow corn, right? Okay, so coming back to the question of being in this moment of transition between knowing that the capitalistic systems are horrible and we're living in them, and we know we can see the future that we're bringing into vision, to how do we bridge this moment? Okay, David, this is 9, overwhelmed and resilient. I have a lot I could say about all these cards, but I'd love to give you first the opportunity to respond to them. I'm going to turn this upright so you can see a bit better. It's a figure with a cell phone kind of like snuggled under a blanket. How's that feel to you? You're smiling.
Oh, that's because that's how I sleep. I sleep with my cell phone underneath my pillow.
Nice. How is it connected to this moment of striving to create this beautiful vision in your head and meeting resistance? How is it connected?
How is it connected? I guess it's connected based on my relationship with my cell phone. Like if things are going well, it's not as attached to me. But if things aren't going so well, it's pretty close.
Mm-hmm. So it's like a needle on the gas gauge in that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a useful thing to know instead of just shaming yourself. just having it as a needle to say, oh, look, the gas tank's almost empty. And then the very straightforward way to look at this would be that the way that you're taking action in the world towards creating this purpose is actually overwhelming you. I suspect the thing that you're doing in the world is the opposite of overwhelming. Is that right?
Yeah, like at this very moment, I don't feel overwhelmed. Like I have felt overwhelmed in the past, but yeah, I definitely feel like I am on the other side of overwhelm right now.
Good. That's good. That's good. So let's talk about, we always talk about both sides of the polarity. What about resilience? What does having resilience for you and how you take action toward this goal mean?
Resilience for me in this particular moment means like basically doing whatever to keep the day-to-day going, knowing that I am working on a larger vision. But I can't access that larger vision unless I continue the day-to-day.
I think there's more on this, but I want to pull the other card and just see what world we have when we blend the energies. Okay. So the feminine is courage and fear. I've been talking about lances piercing to the heart of things, all called anyways. This is really the card that depicts that. What does courage mean for you and how you're receiving from the world?
Well, courage for me in general is actually receiving. I like to be on the giving end. I don't like to actually receive things.
There you go. Yes. I mean, I think culturally, men and women really struggle with this feminine energy of receiving because we take a lot more stuff. I mean, we all have different stories for why that is, but yeah, this is such a, I mean, it's true of everyone. It's true of just about everybody I know I talk to you about. In this time, I've had this big thing of connecting with people who chronically over-support other people and never ask for themselves to receive anything. And it's an enormously vulnerable thing to show up with your fear and let your tender little beating heart be seen. What would that look like for getting your business funded?
So it'll look like basically actually utilizing the support system I've created for the past decade. So actually telling people that are close to me that I need funding for this idea.
Yeah. Yes. How does it feel to say that? What's going on in your body when you say that simple statement? I'm going to ask people who I love and I know they love me to help me create this vision.
It feels very awkward.
Yeah, right? That's the juice. So for us, what I would do if we were on a one-on-one reading and you weren't in front of 30 people or however many people in the call, 28 people, we would go into that sensation in your body. And you can do this after, when you're on time with your journaling, is to say that statement. I want to ask people who love me to show up and support me in this business. I feel it in myself. I've even got some of that wound too. It shows up in my stomach. Notice physically where it's located in your body. And you can put your hand on that place and breathe up underneath that hand and start to just bring some well-being to that. And see if there's any old stories. See if you can get your unconscious to bring to you like a little paper boat being blown by the calm wind. What's the first time I remember feeling this sensation in my body? And just write about that. Like during the first and the worst. What's the first time I felt this sensation in my body? What's the worst time I felt this sensation in my body? And why not have anything to do with getting a business funded? Because when you were like 5, when it happened, you weren't an entrepreneur. Maybe you were. Maybe it was about a lemonade stand. But usually it's not about anything that's remotely logically connected. So this is the leap into the unconscious. And then you can start to have a conversation with that part of yourself and find out would that little 5-year-old need to hear about this moment? Again, I could spend 90 minutes just doing like how we work with the unconscious to go into the somatics of these emotions, because they're not just letters in a word written on a bright colored pretty card. We need to get to the place where they are living in our flesh and bone, and we're moving information and the energy through, because that's how you fly right through the center of the storm. And that's where your life really starts to change. So I feel like I just gave y'all like a ton of information. Is anybody confused and like, what the hell is this crazy? I could never do this. She's a witch. What is she doing? I'm going to turn this Zoom off and think she was really smart, but I'm never going to be able to use this at home on my own. Like, I want to connect this in a practical way to your life.
One thing I'm curious about is like, is there training for, reading the cards? There's like the cards itself, and then, we can play them, but like, what about the skill set that you have right here? How do we learn that?
So there's a couple different skill sets that I'm merging. I have training in emotional freedom technique, which is what I was just describing. Like, if we were in a session together, we would do all this rest of the stuff. That was basically like, now we would use this as an entry point to go down the emotional freedom technique and conscious rabbit hole, which is super juicy. And you can absolutely get training in that. I'm going to be teaching people how to use my card deck in particular. There's lots of amazing teachers on tarot and oracle cards in general. So many places people can tap in depending on where their interest is. I just want to check back in and see, like, how did that all land for you, the reading? We're doing just the tiniest little, like, surface shallow shell level. This is more giving you, like, an entry point to go now do the journaling and dig deep enough to get to the big realization is probably like 2 or 3 more layers deep, and it's probably too vulnerable for us to do in this call. But do you feel like you have enough to continue with this?
Yeah. It definitely hit home, and I am not unfamiliar with tarot cards.
The territory?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I hope that was helpful.
All right. Thank you, Theo. Is there anyone else who would want to do another reading?
I just want to quickly answer Megan's question about were the cards numbered 9 and 6. So that's the suit of the card. The Enneagram has 9 archetypes in it. So the numbers on here, there will be 7 cards that have a 6 and 7 cards that have a 9. That's what the dots on the bottom indicate. The dots are under the one that is the shadow, the upright position, the gift position. There's a lot of layers in this, so it does require a little bit of like staying with it. But I think you can, very much like the tarot, it's immediately accessible if you have a good guidebook at least. You can start reading cards really quickly, and then the layers just accrete and accrete and accrete and accrete. And don't worry about what you don't know. Just let it. Be glad for the richness of what's there, and don't try to figure out anything that they're not ready for. It'll get there exactly in the perfect timing. So I think maybe we had another volunteer for a reading. Is that what you're telling me, Peter?
All right, Hawk, you're up.
Or another question?
Oh, okay. Hi, Chris. My name's Hawk.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. I'm planning to move to Canada to finish college, get my bachelor's, master's, and PhD, maybe psychology or something this decade. I'm wondering, will it be prosperous? Because I've struggled in America, because of economic reasons.
This is so on the same frequency as the question that we just on. I mean, this is like the question of the moment, right? But I don't want to ask exactly the same question. I want to, again, I have to like stop babbling and go to the place in me that knows how to do these readings. It's a very funny consciousness switch to like juggle in between these two places in myself. requires a lot more slowness. So what I heard was, I don't think I got it all. You're considering pursuing some advanced studies, maybe in psychology. What were the things? In Canada?
Yeah, like psychology or something. Yeah, in Canada.
Okay.
Because it's more than America. Maybe another way to rephrase it is, my parents were born in the Vietnam War. So maybe I'm looking for peace in Canada compared to the experience of America, like to see the world, more peaceful land. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So it feels like there's two questions there. There's both what to do with my life, and there's also making this geographic decision. And in this present moment, it sounds like you're feeling like this decision is looming over you. How soon does it need to be made? What do you need to do in this present moment? This like thing that I was talking about earlier. We plan not to know what we're going to do in the future, but what to do now. What is it that you need to do now about this decision?
This is like a 5 to 10 year plan. So I need to look for work, especially after there's a vaccine and the lockdowns stop. So look for work and then build my income to where I would be able to move to Canada and get a student visa and all that.
It sounds like in this 5 to 10 year plan, there's an enormous amount of unknown and complexity.
Yeah.
And that can be super difficult for us there's a part in all of us that wants to just know how shit's going to go and know that it's going to be okay. Right.
Yeah.
Let's bring it to as practical and present moment as we can, because that's where the cards can really shine. And I suspect that where to go in with that is, I'm going to have to, again, go to the quiet place in myself that senses the deeper layer. The question that comes to me is, what's the part of you that feels like you're in a rush right now? What is it literally saying in your head?
I just turned 28, and culturally, Vietnamese people at 28 are supposed to have a family and all this stuff, but I don't want that. I'm still.
Say that last part again. Culturally,
Vietnamese people at 28 already have like 5 kids because it's different. It's developing.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So you're feeling the pressure to conform to your family and larger over culture's expectations of what a 28-year-old should be doing with their life.
Yeah, like at 28, Vietnamese men are supposed to provide and all that stuff. I am the first person in my generation that has the time to consider, let me develop myself and consider marriage at 40. John Lennon was a better father at 35. Yeah.
Beautiful. So that feels like the place to go in.
Okay.
I suspect there's some pain around like, I'm not there, and you know, maybe we can do this thing where we like, I'll be there in 10 years, and it's like, no, I need to be okay with my life right now. I need to be okay with myself right now. So cards can really help in that dissonance between, that's why the should monster comes up. I should be different than I am. And I would like to focus the reading here on that tender place, which is like, I'm not where I should be.
Okay.
Right? Okay, so let's do the fractal reading for you. I would like to do the first card pull as in what way am I struggling imposing these standards on myself? And then one for how is my family showing up in imposing these standards that I'm not doing the thing. That's just the truth. I'm not doing the thing. And we can feel all kinds of ways about that, but that's just what is. So, and then the third one is, how is my culture influencing this oppressive should, you know? Does that feel right?
Yes.
Okay, great. I know I've gotten this thread that I'm excited for when I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to see what the cards are going to say. It's going to be good. I'm going to have to restrain myself because we don't have that much time left. But here we go. We'll do the best we can. We'll get through as many as we can. All right. I got the individual card. Family card. I feel like we're only going to have time for those two. So let's do the individual. How are you imposing this suffering on yourself? How have you taken these cultural overculture standards into your own physical body? They live in you, and they're even in your DNA because they come from our ancestral line. We inherit what our ancestors knew and what they feared and a whole bit. So, like, how is this physically showing up in your own body? Oh, I love this card. Oh, my God.
Number is
Okay,
it?
David, this is the number 1. This is Enneagram 1, which is about like perfectionism and idealism. This is the reformer type of the Enneagram. It is like all the cards are black and white in the 1 because one's red, black, and white. So this is perfectionism.
Okay.
And this is do it ugly. And I'm also very much noticing that this almost looks like an Asian character.
Yeah.
What does it bring up for you?
I do come from a perfectionist culture. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I do come from a perfectionist culture, and I guess in the past 200 years, it's only accelerated due to wars, and generally the West and America going to war with Asian countries for 100 years. The idea is to have to be extremely perfect in order to make it into this extremely narrow economic world. And now in this century, way beyond skin color, it's just everything is be this perfect robot in order to make this money to feed your family, especially if it's a large family.
As you're talking, I noticed that I'm almost not even hearing your words. I'm hearing this new tone of voice, this new energy kind of sprouting from you, like a beautiful little Tokyo, the cherry blossoms. It's just like there's a spark that emerged from you when you were talking about this. It was like you're touching something alive in yourself.
Yeah. I remember as a teenager, I was very creative because there was this giant room for failure and just to explore. Then in my 20s, everything became either if you're not making money, then that's it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, this card comes as a big, it's like putting salve on an injury. The permission of this card is to do it ugly. And this is maybe one of my favorite symbols that I painted because I took on like a suit of clothes, this permission to do it ugly. And I just took my paintbrush and I went and like scribbled it around as fast as I could. And I did this many different times. I mean, I just had like a lot of paper and I squiggled it a bunch of times and I took the one that I like the best. And it's beautiful.
It is.
But it comes from as much freedom of permission to do it ugly, ultimately made one of the most beautiful symbols in the deck, in my opinion.
Yeah, and as I turn my head to where like the horn is sticking up, it looks like a dragon.
I love it. Yeah, and I never could have planned that it was going to look exactly like that. It was only through that process. So if you can find a place in your body, even if it's only one single cell that knows how to feel that free, and know that nothing in your external environment actually needs to change for you to feel that, just notice that you can feel that. Even if you're in the middle of solitary confinement, that part of you still knows how to feel that way. And the more you bring your attention to that place in your body that knows how to feel that free and have that much permission to do it ugly, because overturning and not measuring up, quote unquote, to your to your culture's standards is going to be ugly. There's no way around it. It's going to be ugly, but in it is beauty as well. So that would be my provocation. We only have 9 minutes left. I want to check in with Peter. Should we turn one more card, or there more? What you got going in the format, Peter?
Yeah, we can go right to the bottom of the hour, but then we have to close up. So if you think you can sneak another one in.
Okay, let's sneak one more in. No, I love this card too.
Oh, is this?
So this is the decisive and maybe question. And it's in the position of what's going on energetically with your parents. And it's not about what your parents are bringing. It's like how you are in the dynamic with your parents. Because we can't really we can't turn cards about people who aren't here. We can only turn a card about you and how you are with your parents.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How does this feel, this decisive and maybe polarity?
I think I've always felt this way as a kid because I was born in Malaysia in '92, and then '96 moved to Vietnam. '98 moved to America. I've always been nomadic, so it's like stay for a period of time, and then I feel I need to travel in order to transform. So it's almost like an E. It's a zero. It's one half of an X. It's like a superhero mask. It's a lot. Earlier I put in the comment. This is the Rorschach cards are like they reveal the inner psyche. So this is almost like a Rorschach tarot set.
Yeah, very much. So let me say that some of that back to you. You said, I want to go back to what you said about moving a lot and traveling. So has that been the primary way that you sort of dealt with this dissonance between your culture's expectations and what spark you feel within yourself?
I tend to adopt a lot of people and cultures into the small family that the small biological family that I have in America. So by expanding my cultural family, I feel like I have this larger family that's more connected to the world. It's not as isolating. And I've learned to use humor a lot to deflect from a lot of pain. So I learned to read something in a more Robin Williams way where it's funnier.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pain in Robin Williams as well.
Yes.
So I would encourage you to trust that place in yourself that is capable of being decisive, because what I hear in the story is that you've actually brought a lot of people and situations, and probably a lot of people in your country would never even consider this quote unquote problem of deciding between Canada and America. Like, you've taken an enormous amount of agency in your life to get to the place where you're even contemplating that choice. So that to me says more about you than which choice you make. The fact that your frame is global and you're even in a place like the Stoa contemplating this thing, I'm like, you're fine. I don't care where you are in 10 years. It's going to be great. Send me a pop postcard.
Okay, thank you.
How's that feel to you?
Yeah, this feels great. Because I feel it's more like the end of Return of the Jedi, where Luke has done his journey, so now he's trying to find a place to build a school, to have that militariness. Yeah.
Well, I don't know what you're going to get up to, but it'll be good.
Okay, thank you.
It'll be good. You're going to figure it out. I mean, there's no way in hell you're going to know where you're going to be in 10 years or 5 years. Yeah. It's just like, and so instead of trying to feed that part of you an answer to that question, you have to look straight at that part of you that can never be filled. that part of us that wants to know how the world's going to turn out in 5 years can never be filled, because 5 years from now will always be 5 years in the future. We never get to, like, okay, in 2025, then that part of me will know what happened and it'll be satisfied. Well, then 5 years from now, it'll just be 2030 and it'll still have the same damn question. So, like, facing towards that part of you that has a wound that wants to know it's all going to be okay, you can let that part of you know in the present moment that it is okay. And that will start to put a stopper in that sink. Do you know what I mean? Because otherwise, our brain can just, like, stay in this figuring out mode, and no amount of figuring out is actually going to fill that sink until we put a stopper in the sink. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we just have 3 minutes left, and I want to say that you can all go to becomingdragon.com and draw a digital card. There's about 40 cards that are up on that website, and we just launched the Kickstarter today to get a printed paper copy of this. We ship a lot of places in the world. I don't know where you all are, but I would be delighted. We're going to be doing some events to teach people how to use the cards and to meet each other and have deep conversations, and I'm super excited to meet you all here on the Stoa. Is there anything, any final wrap-up stuff you got?
Yeah, I'll make some closing announcements, but Cris, thank you so much for coming to the Stoa and introducing Becoming Dragon and having 2 live reading demos. That was a lot of fun. And if you guys want to jump on the Discord right now and continue this conversation, you can do so. In a half hour, I believe Tyson's event is on. Let me just double check. Yes, a little Rap Unbattles with Tyson Wagner. That is in 30 minutes. You can RSVP on the website. A lot of cool events coming up in the week, including Jim Rutt, Proto B, What You Shame Stays the Same with myself and AJ Bond. So you can check out the website from there.